terrible. It took me over an hour to get from Menlo Park to here. 30 minutes to go, less than 2 miles.
Okay, so
let's do a roll call and.
Are we ready? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So roll call. Commissioner Giancarelli.
Present.
Commissioner Lorenas.
Here.
Commissioner Mateusz.
Present.
And there is a quorum. Commissioners Brennan and Bernardo not yet present.
Great. Okay. So we do have a quorum. So let's just kind of get started. And I know that we'll be, you know, the commissioners are going to be coming in later, and it's bad. It's brutal outside in terms of traffic. So do we want to just start? Did you want to say anything before we start with the goal planning workshop? Because I really am hoping that we'll have all of us here, but you know, we can do as much as we can.
What we could do, this is scheduled for from 6 to 9 o'clock. And if we want to try to schedule a special meeting, we could take 5 minutes at 5 to 9.
And look at that?
And just look at the calendar then when everybody is here.
Okay, perfect.
Robert said he wasn't going to be able to get here till about 6:30. We don't have Commissioner Brennan. You might, if you wanted to take a few more minutes to wait for Commissioner Brennan before we get rolling with Martin.
Absolutely. Would it be of any use for you to make some progress on those dates, at least with the 3, so when the 2 are here?
Okay. So far, as we know, we couldn't make today. Tom and I have, between us, have conflicts all next week. The email I sent out today was for February the 5th. If there is a consensus that we would like to take action after that, prior to the Coastal Commission hearing, there is of course plenty of time to draft some comments. So far for the 5th, Commissioners Bernardo, Giancarelli, and Mateusz have said yes. Commissioner Lorenas, would you be available on the 5th?
I'm checking my calendar right now.
So I want to make it
at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Are you available, Ed?
4, 6. Yeah, I think I am.
Okay. So so I just want to put this out there for Tom and Ed to know. I actually received a phone call from the Half Moon Bay Seafood Marketing Association asking that this meeting, our special meeting, and I don't even know how they knew about it except they probably watched the video, that the meeting be further out because they want to have a comment on it. And so they did not want the meeting tonight. And the first time that we could make it to meet.
So this is a public meeting we're talking?
Yeah, this is the special meeting. Yeah, that's why that they called. They called about that.
Just to make sure.
Yeah. That's the special meeting to talk about the Johnson Pier configuration and the hoist.
I'm sorry, who called?
The Half Moon Bay Seafood Marketing Association called me specifically to ask me to move out this meeting.
Actually, I just talked to Lisa Damraj.
She called me the other day.
And she wanted to have the meeting as soon as possible.
That's not what she told me, and she didn't want it today. So
well, she told me that this afternoon.
So it looks like 4 of us. How many of us can make it on the 5th?
Commissioner Brennan, you had said to me on the phone earlier today that you could not make it on the 5th.
That's correct.
All right. So there are 4 commissioners who can make it on the 5th.
Okay. So let's tentatively schedule it there. I'll let the Half Moon Bay Seafood Marketing Association know that that's a tentative day.
I'd like to get, the notice out. I don't see other days where we could get a full quorum, the full board.
Right.
Judging by the contacts that Debbie has made so far. So we're starting to run out of time if we want to be able to
direct you to do something before the Coastal Commission meeting on February 8th in Cambria.
Correct.
So, okay, so if 4 of us can make it, then let's just schedule it and hopefully.
Would it help to have it any earlier?
In the day?
Yeah.
I'd ask Commissioner Brennan that. If we're looking at 6 o'clock on the 5th, is there a better time on the 5th for you?
I'm not available on the 5th right now.
Okay.
Okay, Ed, do you have a time preference?
I know that for Commissioner Bernardo, obviously, evening would be better.
Okay.
Oh, that's true, because he's got come from Oakland. Okay. So I don't know, Tom.
Possibly have the next one then at Oyster Point. Have the next one at Oyster Point.
You mean the February 5th meeting? Well, but okay, so
But-
we are having this issue about Johnson Pier, so I'd rather have it on the coast.
Yeah.
And I think that the Half Moon Bay Seafood Marketing Association wants to participate. That's what Lisa told me a couple days ago when she called. So I think that in fairness to them and to others who have an interest on the coast side, I think it's probably easier to have it over here. Better too. But I don't know, Tom, it's a good suggestion.
And I would say that if you want members of the public here,
Yeah,
people work. So having it in the middle of the day excludes people.
Yeah. 6
Well,
o'clock,
when it comes to
6:30.
Johnson Pier, because there's no fishing going on now, so basically, the people that fish and have our leases have very little to do at this time of the year because of the weather, the closed seasons, and the other things that would involve normally being engaged in work.
So you're saying nobody else from the public would be interested in this?
Not everybody works.
Okay.
Well,
I still
can I
think
suggest
that
then
Most of
there's
us have to pay the
time.
bills in the Bay Area.
So Robert has to travel the furthest.
can I
so
suggest
some-
6 o'clock or 6:30 then on the 5th?
Yeah.
6:30's fine.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay,
6:30.
how does that work for you, Tom?
Fine.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got that scheduled.
Okay.
Well, with that, move on to the
Regular agenda.
regular agenda, and then, as the board knows, we retained Martin Roush to work with the board on the strategic planning process, and we also know that it would be great to get some 2000 goals and objectives out there. However, we don't have 2017 months to build on. And Martin and I have talked about this quite a bit over the last week or 10 days. Martin's got a PowerPoint. He's done plenty of this sort of work before, which is why he's here. And I know that in our audience here we've got Catherine Slater-Carter, who knows that Roush Consulting has worked with both the Montera District and the Sewer Authority of the Mid-Coast. So with that, tell me when you want me to fire up the PowerPoint, and I'll turn it over to Martin.
Yeah, we can go ahead and fire that up. Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you for coming out on this rainy night. I know I had trouble getting here quite early. It must be really nasty right now for Robert.
Yeah.
It's got the worst commute. At the beginning of this, we'll hand out an agenda in just a moment, a detailed agenda for what we're doing. Let's hold it for just a moment. I'd like to ask you to sort of leave the timing and the agenda to me. I'll make sure we get through what we need to get through and just relax, and we'll go through the steps as we go. I will be doing a fair amount of talking as briefly as I can, maybe 10 or 15 minutes at the beginning here, and then it will switch into workshop mode. You guys will get to do 99% of the talking. So I'd like to make just a brief introduction so that we're all kind of on the same page about what this whole process is about. And do you mind? There it is. Let's see if I can work this right. So what this little presentation here is just an outline of the overall process and what we're doing here in this process. So as a first mention, what is strategic planning? What are we going to do overall? And in simple terms, it's a systematic process that we'll be going through to envision a desired future for this district and then translate that vision into a set of goals and objectives. So it's a very kind of high level kind of look at what we're doing. And it will include setting priorities, board level priorities, then having staff make sure you have the resources to do what you're asking them to do, and then they'll develop a plan for implementing that direction. And we'll also have some kind of plan for the board to monitor progress over time. So it's a real plan that should be looked at all the time. In fact, the most simplified version of it, many of the managers I do this with keep it like taped to their computer on their desk. It should be a living, active thing. It shouldn't just disappear onto the wall somewhere. And this picture that I've used before, I think I used it in our interview, of these guys on, I always say what kind of boat it is incorrectly, someone will know, not me. But in simple terms, what we're doing is we're saying if the harbor district was this boat and all of you were these guys with, you know, rowing, if we just go out and work as hard as we can, that, who knows what we're going to do. Some people may be rowing harder on the right or the left or at a different pace. We could go in circles or go nowhere. Basically, in most simple terms, what we're doing is we're saying, where is the boat of the harbor district going? What is our destination? And how do we coordinate everyone to get ourselves there? That's the simplest big picture idea about what we're doing. And so to do that, we're going to have a number of just classic outcomes. We're going to ask ourselves, why does our district exist? I know you have a mission statement, but we'll look at it again and we'll say, is that the right thing, or is it still accurate? What is our role in this community? That's the mission. We'll say, what should our district be like in 5 years and 10 years or more? That's a vision for the future. That's really that destination. And we'll describe that in words. We'll ask, what are the district's core values? And we'll come up with some values, and those are, we'll look at those in a minute, just very briefly. Those are to help in decision making, kind of keeping us all on the same track. We'll ask ourselves, the board, well, this is all board stuff. Mission, vision, values, goals and objectives. What are the goals and objectives we need to accomplish to achieve our vision and our mission? That's your direction. You'll also identify priorities, both in terms of importance, like this is a very important thing, but it may not happen for 5 or 10 years, or it may happen in 2 months. And there may be some urgent things. There may be some things you'll say, look, we want to really get these done quickly. So you'll have 2 kinds of priorities, and the staff will then look at everything and say, what do we need to do to get all this done? What work needs to be done? And they'll develop an implementation plan, and part of that will be to say, okay, you asked us to do all these goals and objectives and these timelines. We can't do it. We need more money, or we need more people, or we need another consultant or whatever, or we can do it. Or we're suggesting you delay this so we can do that.
When do we get to ask questions about these items?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this feels very specific.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought strategic planning should be very high level, coming up with conceptual ideas for the direction we'd like to see the district moving in versus everybody's laundry list of little itty-bitty projects or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel very high-level conceptual.
This is staff stuff down here. All of this is pretty high level. We'll look at examples of it. Mission, vision, goals and objectives. That's all district policy making. That will not be laundry list. Yes.
I have somewhat of a similar question. I've done a lot of these in my working world, and one of the things that happens is we start with the strategic planning, but it's so much easier for people to go into specific whatever it is. This is because you can detail it. You know, this is like in the case of my interest, water quality, for example. You know, that's something I can relate to, and I can start talking about, here's what we need to do about water quality. But in strategic planning, water quality could be one of the core values or something that the board wants to work on and accomplish, but it's often easy to go from the broader picture to dive into the actual operational plan, like how are we going to fix the water quality in the harbor, and that's really not, in my view, not a strategic planning.
No, absolutely.
So how do we avoid doing that? Because it's, you know, in discussions, that's where it's easiest to go, because that's kind of where we're comfortable.
Everybody's got their pet project or
right. Well, that's my job, to make sure that as we're talking, of course, we're going to bring up lots of things that aren't strategic at different times, but it'll be my job to steer the conversation, steer the process, so that we set that aside or note it for the future or do something with it so it doesn't tangle us up. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. It never is a problem, but I don't want to say that we'll never have an incorrect conversation. We'll just limit it.
Yeah.
Well, but just to back up though, I think it's important to recognize that we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on what was called a strategic plan that we didn't complete, that did not do any of those things. So it does happen that sometimes strategic plans go off the rails. So I think we want to be really careful to make sure that we don't do that again. So just want to reflect that.
Well, I've been doing this since 1991. I don't know, hundreds of them, and none have gone off the rails in that way. So we're going to complete this. It will be appropriate, and if you think it's not at some point, bring it up and we'll address that. There will be an engagement program. It already started in a very minor way. I had a couple of interviews with a few people, but I'll describe those in a minute. We purposely did not detail exactly how that's going to work yet. I want to get a little farther along. That's coming soon. I want to understand the community, who the people are, what their needs are. But some of the things that could occur are, additional phone interviews, public workshops, almost certainly, some kind of public involvement period. In other words, periods of time where people can review or comment. Some kind of summary mailer or emailer, information on the web, maybe a blog. Press releases, posts on social media, presentations to groups, internal outreach to staff, in other words, making sure the staff is following along and participating, as some are. Additional board review may be necessary if we get public input and it causes us to say, hey, maybe we need to do something that we weren't first talking about. So I'm not saying we're going to do all these things. We're going to pick the appropriate things to do that are appropriate for this community. We will have a vision statement. The vision statement may be extremely short, like a phrase. Here's one that I happen to like. Some of you may have seen it before if you've heard me speak somewhere. But just to give an example of, I'm a believer that things ought to mean something and help guide us in some way. This is a water district, a regional water supplier in Los Angeles. This was all the way back from the 90s. But their vision was that they were going to follow a jointly prepared, commonly understood and supported regional plan for achieving a high degree of water supply. And then they basically say we're going to do it cooperatively with all our neighbors. And here's where the part that I like a lot, let's see, is that it's going to, developing and implementing the water supply reliability plan will permit our service area to successfully meet its water needs in the face of a future prolonged drought and or a cutback of 20% in imported supplies. So they were saying something that could be measured. They were saying, our vision is that we're going to find a way to survive a 20% drought and not have it impact our customers. And so that happened to be something they've worked on for a couple of decades. They've made a lot of progress, but it really is a long-term vision. Yours may look 100% different. I'm just simply pointing out that I normally don't want things to just be words that sound good and aren't useful. Goals and objectives. This becomes the sort of core, rubber meets the road kind of part of the thing where you give direction to the district and the community and the staff. So again, you're a harbor district, so yours won't be like this, but you'll have goals. Several of them, I'm sure, maybe half a dozen. Here's one on finances. These people wanted well-planned finances with a long-range outlook. They want to maintain a well-planned, proactive financial condition that minimizes rate shocks and impacts on customers while meeting all service needs. These do sound a little bit like motherhood and apple pie, but for them, that's what they wanted. They were basically indicating we want more planning and more proactive financial. And then they had a series of objectives to meet that goal. And so the first one was, they have a numbering system usually. This is a priority 1. So there's some other things in there. Plan for and manage finances to maintain long-range financial stability, competitive and fair rates, and strong bond ratings. So that's the direction. That's the level of it. Then the staff has to say, how are we going to make sure to show our board that we're planning and managing finances to do this? There was another goal, another objective. This was also a first level priority. It's in the same numbering, 4, 1, 2. Assure that financial master planning takes into account all financial needs, including reserves, programs, and contingencies. So, again, we're not going to go through all these. They have a whole bunch. Here's one that was very specific. Manage unfunded liabilities related to pensions and benefits. Obtain board consensus to assure the liabilities are appropriately and prudently addressed. So this is the level of the core part of the report. I don't know if that reflects what you were expecting or if it doesn't, but this is what we're working towards. In our path to work there, we will have some conversations that are a little off topic, but we'll rein them in and come back. A lot of times, some of those comments will be useful, but they'll be handed over to Steve, to carry to implement into the plan. Then there will be values. Values sound very much like motherhood and apple pie again, like, what is this? But if they're really written in a way that means something to this district, they're useful in two ways. You want the employees and you want the board to be following these values. It helps people align their work with the values. And it also helps in decision making. So if you're coming to a decision, you can turn your value around, which is these people's value. One of them was open, transparent, and responsive to customers. You can, welcome Robert.
Oh, rambling.
You made it through the gauntlet.
Yes.
You made
Sorry,
it here
I'm late.
alive.
I know it was pretty rough out there in terms of traffic. So we're just going through a little outline of what we're doing with this program. There is a handout. In fact, we should have handed it out.
Oh,
So we forgot.
Yeah.
You can kind of catch up by just go through it. Another value for these people was, is it sensitive to rates, cost efficient, and financially responsible? So if you have a decision, you can ask yourself, does it align with these values? Does it do these things? And then there will be staff implementation plans. I didn't bring one with me because that's really the end of the process. But the implementation plan is really the staff's job.
Yeah.
Some boards take an interest in it, and we'll work that out when we get there. In my mind, it's entirely the prerogative of staff to do what they want. They just have to show they're meeting the goals and objectives. But sometimes it's nice to have the staff at least indicate in a sentence or two how they plan to achieve each goal, like just give an idea of how and when they're going to do it, and then report on the resources as part of that. Like, yes, we can do all these things, or no, we think we should postpone this one or change that one. So that's sort of the final review of the document. Any comments or questions on any of this? That was meant to simply identify where we're going. Okay. Then we can, we can shut that down. That's done. So now we can pass out the agenda too. And you have those slides if you want to refer to those. You got them over there.
yeah. Sorry, Ed.
Good. Rich.
Commissioner.
Is there enough there? So we have a fairly full evening tonight. We're going to move through things, and the overall thing we're going to be doing is getting a bunch of issues sort of out on the table, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. But we've done the sort of welcome and introduction, this overview of the strategic planning process. That's two. I'm going to report on the interviews, give you a summary of what I heard from everybody. We're going to go through an exercise called Rating the District Today, where we're going to look at the district as it is today. We're going to look at what's coming down the road tomorrow, those challenges and opportunities. We're going to take a first look at priorities, mostly to hear from each other what's most important to each of you, so we can get that out a little bit. That doesn't mean that settles a priority, it just means it starts to get some ideas out there. And then we're going to take some initial steps toward developing a common vision for the future. In other words, we're going to start to paint that picture of where each of you thinks the district ought to be somewhere in the future, 5 years, 10 years, farther. That's the big picture thing.
How is the public supposed to engage in this process?
Good question. I should.
And I have a related question, and that is, I'm not clear on the bigger part of the process. Like, we're here today. Are we actually going to come out with a document now, or are we is this like the beginning and then we're going to meet again? You know what I mean?
Yes. Let me take Sabrina's question first,
Okay.
and then we'll get yours. We have two public here. It's a very small group, so I think we can allow them to, if they have a comment, and thank you, Sabrina, for stopping me. I was facing this way and kind of forgetting. But I think if you have some comments, indicate. I'll be looking this way most of the time, but get someone's attention and ask your question, make your comment, whatever. If that's acceptable, I think it's
That's
such a small
totally
group.
fine, yeah.
If there were more people, we'd do something a little more formal, but I think that's appropriate. As far as the big picture, the original purpose for this evening was to look at annual goals for the manager. But as I prepared for this, I believe that it would be most efficient if we just start out the process from the beginning and work systematically through it, instead of trying to, in a very short period of time, force ourselves to some kind of consensus that I don't think we're going to reach. So what we have tonight, I'd have to go to the proposal to see exactly what was scoped, but normally what we would do is have this workshop. It would have been longer normally, like 6 hours, like a day workshop. So we'll probably have one more workshop like this, and that will get us to a point where we can kind of start to organize the information, and we'll have a plan at that point to take it to the public. And so what we'll do is we'll have some initial ideas from this district to kind of create a framework for people to respond to. And we'll have some kind of process which we'll bring to you probably next time to discuss, to approve, how we will get people's input into that, and then how we'll incorporate that input. But the normal pattern is sort of in three, like initial sort of outline and scope for where we think this thing's going, get people's feedback. Then kind of put their feedback plus your original plan together and give another opportunity for feedback, and then wrap it up. And give people a final chance to say, oh yeah, this is right, or no, we disagree, we think this didn't go right. And then the board gets the final opportunity to incorporate that and determine what it is.
So can I give some feedback on that?
Yes.
So I feel like we did not do a very good job of explaining that to the public who might have wanted to show up at this meeting, since now we know from what you're describing is that there's only going to be 2 meetings like this. And I didn't reach out to people to get them to come to this meeting. It seems to me that it would have been more appropriate to have a daytime workshop where we could have what you first described, which is like a full day meeting with a break in the middle, and where there's food and everybody's not like coming in after work exhausted in the rain, ready to crash and burn. I mean, I don't feel like I'm in the frame of mind to really do this tonight. So, because I wasn't expecting it, and I just, I'm working 2 jobs right now, so I have a really long day, and I, in looking at the packet information, in no way was it explained to me that we were going to dive in to this process this evening. So I just feel like the communication about what it is that we're doing hasn't been very clear in general, and then also how the community should get involved, and in addition to that, how to get the stakeholders involved, and what is the process for the public outreach. Like, I'd kind of like to see an outline. So I thought tonight what we were going to be talking about is the approach, that we weren't going to get into the content yet, but we were going to figure out the approach to the strategic plan. So I'm just a little surprised that this is what we're doing.
Okay.
Well, so I'm going to add to something. I'm not surprised because this meeting has been on our calendars for over a month now. This was scheduled before the holidays. So I'm glad that we're kind of moving in this direction. I got a call from the Half Moon Bay Seafood Marketing Association, so people know that this has been on our calendar and on our agenda. We talked about it at the meeting last week.
They're not here, by the way.
But the point is that this meeting has been on my calendar for over a month. So I would like to proceed, if anything, to at least get our 2018 goals and objectives done so that we can give direction to the general manager on the things we want to accomplish, and then maybe, and I have not talked to you about how this is going to be set up, but it sounds like to me that the most commonsensical way is to get those annual goals, which we've been kind of doing, and then figuring out how that's going to fit into the broader strategic planning.
That's not what we just heard.
So,
yeah, no, that's not what we're...
I know, but I'm just saying, so we're kind of reversing it,
Yes.
right? And that's okay,
And
but
so,
the point is, this has been on the calendar, and I would like to proceed on how you plan on doing
Let me
this.
respond to Sabrina. As far as the public engagement goes, it was never my plan, going back to the original proposal, that, I mean, of course the public's welcome and they could always be invited, and there may be people who are interested, and I apologize if we didn't give them an opportunity. But there will be plenty of opportunities going forward. It was always my belief that it would be most effective if this board starts on the process and we get a framework for people to respond to. And then we'll engage the public and they'll be able to march along. We'll have a plan from there.
So we're coming up with that framework tonight.
We're starting on the framework. The framework will actually be decided upon at the next time. So we're just laying stuff out on the table and getting the discussion going. We're not going to have any conclusions tonight. Merely getting issues and priorities out.
Because I'd really like to talk about the framework for the public meetings.
Can we save that so we can move through this?
Yeah.
Is that going to be
process
discussed tonight
first.
though, or when is that going to be
Yes,
discussed?
at the end.
Okay, great.
So let's move on. So to be clear, Virginia, I'm not proposing that we work on annual goals.
Okay.
Because I don't think we would accomplish.
Then then we'll have to do that at a board meeting next or something. We'll have to figure that out. And that's fine.
I would like to report on what I heard from the interviews, and I don't think anything will surprise any of you. They were actually quite consistent. In a number of cases, people had differing views of things, but they were the same topics, so they were quite consistent. I spoke to the board, of course, all of you. I spoke to what's the equivalent of the management team. John, the two Johns, and Jim Rillo. And I spoke to just a few stakeholders. It's just only to dip my toe in and start to get an idea of what people are thinking. It was Lisa Damrosch, Lisa Ketchum, Keith Hirhan, I may not get all the names completely right, Dan Horsley, Don, I wrote Dan, yes it was Don, Scott Grindy, and I had two more that I wasn't able to get a time for, but I think I'm talking to them late in the week, Mary Ann Lee and Ann LeClaire.
Why would you contact someone who sued us?
I just spoke to Steve, and we went through, and he just gave me a
Or
little
attempted to sue us, and we had to settle
So
and
we're
pay
not
a huge
on
amount
that.
of
Can
money.
we just move on? So
Yeah.
Commodore of the Yacht Club. I gave Martin the name of the Commodore of the Yacht Club as I got it off the website. It turns out the website was out of date, but Scott actually provided another name as well, John Pettigrew. I'm not sure if
He wasn't able to speak to me, but he's on the list that I'll get back to.
another member of the Yacht Club.
Yeah, so I wasn't looking for that many. Scott asked me to speak to him, so I said I would. This is not meant to be conclusive. It was meant to simply start for me to understand and to also get some issues out on the table so we can start to hear them and hear the different things. And again, you're not going to be surprised, I think, for most of them. When it comes to management, I think for the most part, the management, the staff here got very high praise. Steve was mentioned a lot. Some of the other staff were mentioned specifically, but it seems like in general, people were happy with the staff. If there was any issue raised, some people were questioning whether it's top heavy at this point, but that's kind of a level of detail beyond what we're talking about now. A good number of folks talked about the district being financially sound and having substantial reserves, maybe no debt, if I understood that correctly. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of requests to develop some more financial policy guidelines. In other words, okay, we think we're financially sound, but how do we know it? What metrics do we use? What judgment tells us? What about reserves? Do we have the right reserve levels? How do we divide money between Pillar Point and Oyster Point? Is there a reason or some policy around that? Things like that. So those were the kinds of comments around finances, mostly just we think they're fine. There was, of course, a lot of talk about Pillar Point only, or Pillar Point and Oyster Point getting engaged in that big project, and some people mentioning the desire to have the district manage other harbors around the county. And so, of course, there's some commissioners who want to leave Oyster Point or have a minimal kind of contract relationship with Oyster Point. Again, you know all of this, pointing out the district doesn't own the property. Others, are investing there. They ought to be responsible. Maybe the city should be responsible. There's all sorts of liabilities with a landfill under it, toxic materials leaking, a fuel system that's dangerous, a variety of things like that. Of course, then there's the opposite view that the district really ought to be engaged at Oyster Point, that that's a critical, wonderful opportunity to take advantage of all that development. It also reinforces what they view as our mission to be a county-wide district. And some view it as sort of a potential moment where if the district isn't able to stay at Oyster Point or isn't able to take advantage of that, maybe it renders us sort of no longer a county district, and there, you know, maybe that leads to ideas of dissolution. So of course, that will be a topic, of course, of this session, and probably the most difficult topic. Capital improvements, almost everybody brought them up. For someone who's just new to the district, of course, there's just a wide variety of things, a lot of timing, a lot of issues, a lot of history. It sounds clearly like infrastructure improvements have been delayed over the years or even the decades. It sounds like they're kind of rolling finally to some degree, but there's a lot needed, and we don't need to go through it all. It's kind of a level of detail, but I think a lot of people were blaming the commissioners, not any individual commissioner, but the commission, I guess, for not being able to make decisive decisions and back them up and help keep that rolling. Of course, to some degree, it's hard to do it in the coastal zone and things, but that was a common comment. There was a question about emergency planning. Yes, go ahead.
If people were blaming the commission, can you be specific? Was this commissioners blaming the commission or the public?
I think both.
That's interesting.
Do we have an emergency plan? A question about if it's adequate, if we have one, what if there's a tsunami, what about other toxic spills, chemical spills, oil spills, fuel spills? Mm-hmm. There could be a lot. Sea level rise planning, it wasn't clear if how far that goes or if it's enough. Sustainability planning, that was brought up, you know, in terms of power use and environmental, you know, efficiencies in terms of power and things like that. There was a few, maybe one or two people who brought up the question of whether the harbor patrol setup is as effective as it ought to be, and the trade-offs between, well, we could have a super fantastic, ultra reliable, perfectly trained harbor group, but it would cost a lot, and instead we've kind of mixed them in with the maintenance people, and that provides some efficiencies in terms of work, but it's maybe compromising it. So there could be an issue there, policy level discussion, not about how to deploy the workers, that's for the staff, but what kind of level of service is expected of them, what kind of budget, what kind of finances are available for that. I think there's some room for discussion there. There was a lot of talk about the commission being the problem. Again, getting back to the commission. If it was praised for anything, I think several or a number of people commented that it's more transparent than it used to be, that people can figure out what's happening with it and track it and find out information. But in general, people commented that they felt it was dysfunctional, that it was embarrassing, that it was not working very effectively. I think clearly there's a lot of frustration and even anger around that. That is an appropriate topic for a strategic plan. It's a strategic issue. And many boards in these kinds of situations talk about how they can work more effectively together. That could be a productive topic. A number of people talked about the history of trying to dissolve the district, the possibility of dissolving it now, the desire not to dissolve it, all sorts of views on it. A number of people pointed me to the various LAFCO studies going back to the 60s and all the way till lately. So that kind of ties into this. Certain people, a lot of people believe that there's problems here. I think even stakeholders who I think have a bone to pick with the district or disagreements with the district, the ones I talked to, felt that it was much more transparent than before, like vastly more, that the staff was much more engaged with them, and they were very pleased about that, that the board, despite the fact that they had negative judgments, a lot of them about the board, some of them at least, that at least you could understand what's happening, and that it was, you know, more open. And it's clear that stakeholder engagement is important to this board and to the staff and to this community, so that will be part of this plan. So that summarizes it. Of course, I probably spoke for 16 hours to people, so that was 10 minutes or something. But I tried to kind of get the gist of it. Any comments or questions about that?
Can you review again, just because I didn't quite catch who the 16 people were that you spoke with?
Yeah, it may not quite be 16. So it was the board. It was John and John on staff, and
John and John?
John Moran, John Draper, Jim Merlot, and Anita Pyle, and Steve. And then it was Lisa Damrosch, Lisa Ketchum, Keith Nearhand, sorry, Don Horsley, Scott Grendy, and I was trying to reach Mary Ann Lee and Ann LeClaire. We traded some emails, but we didn't talk. And then Scott asked me to speak to
John Pettigrew,
and I'd been in touch with him. He wasn't on my list, but they asked, so I said okay. So that's the list. So yeah, not 16, 1, 2, 3,
Did
4.
anybody talk about the fraud that happened when Scott was
In the
working
past?
here? Yeah.
Yes, quite a number of people, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's where some of the appreciation for both the board and the staff, you know, that was contrasted quite strongly. I'd say quite a few people brought that up. Yeah, absolutely. A big change in that way in terms of just business practices, you know, trustworthy, professional, courteous, engaged. I mean, people gave a lot of nice adjectives, especially towards the staff, and that they reach out, that they can count on them, that they know what's happening and know how to reach them, and all of that. And same with the board in that sense, that the board is not engaged in that kind of thing. So that's that. So this is where we kind of switch gears here. My sort of reporting and talking point is mostly over.
Well, you left out sexual harassment, retaliation, discrimination.
Right. I think, you know, clearly I'm in no position to deal with those issues. So yes, people did bring that up. And that went into the general unhappiness with the commission. So I want to move into the part where you get engaged in talking, so it's your turn. But before we get there, I just want to note, you know, it's clear there's been a lot of contention on this board, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. Every individual has a reason to believe that they're right and others are wrong. You know, I'm not here to judge that. I'm incapable of that. But what I would say is recognizing that can be helpful. And I ask you to realize that it would be very easy for all of us to trigger each other into normal patterns of being unhappy with what different people do or say. But if we're going to be successful at this, we have to find a way to work together, recognizing that our job is to do this for the community, you know, those stakeholders that we talk a lot about. So I'd like to ask you to do a few things. They're very simple. I know we're all adults. This is nothing new, but I don't think it hurts to remember to, you know, start by listening well. Hear what other people are saying. I would say, you know, I see a lot of boards, probably hundreds over the years, definitely hundreds over the years. Lots of problems like this board has, other different problems, but I've come to believe, after seeing them over many, many years, decades at this point, that even the person who somebody doesn't like or disagrees with all the time often has a kernel of truth, something to offer. And the reason we have boards, the reason we have, in this case, 5 people, we want them to be different. We want them to have different points of view. We want them to come from different places. And our job, our difficult job, this is a forced marriage, so to speak. We didn't pick each other necessarily. Our job is to overcome that difference and find a way. So I'm encouraging us all to try again to find a way in this process and then in future processes. So listen well and carefully. Today, we're going to make it a little easy on all of us. we're going to focus today on getting our issues out and thoughts, which means everyone is free to say what they think and say it clearly. And I'm asking each of you to listen to what they're saying. We're not going to deliberate today. That's why we don't have to worry about some people not being here. They'll get a chance to hear us next time. We're not going to deliberate. We're not going to decide. We're just going to listen and understand. Get those issues out. We'll put them together next time. Remember what I already said. This is really all about the community. And we all have different ideas about what that community is and what it means and who those people are. But we're here to serve them. Before you speak, think of others. Make our words count. See if we can make them more effective than they normally are. Maybe we can use less of them and make them count for more. In general, I'm going to ask each of you to comment on each issue. So the idea is everyone gets a chance to say something about everything. If you have a question, feel free. We're not going to get in a tangle in the debate and try to settle anything tonight. And then finally, very simple, be courteous. That counts for a lot. We all know that. Just simple courtesy will help a lot. Unless there's any comments, let's get into finally you guys thinking and talking so you don't fall asleep here at 7 at night. Before we can talk about the future and the long-range plans, we need to understand a little bit about where we are. So let's start with today. And I'm going to ask you to participate in a little exercise called Rating the District Today. And what I'm going to ask you to do is think about any aspect of the district you want. In fact, can we pass this out? Mm-hmm. I'll pass them out this way. This is a list. This list is actually developed for energy utilities for the most part, sanitary districts, water districts, but the topics work. The topics work for, as a reminder, take a minute and think about the district. Here's some, you don't have to read all the details in this, but you might want to look at the categories: customer satisfaction, employee and leadership development, operational optimization, and you can read some of the words about what that means: financial viability, operational resiliency, infrastructure, etc. Think about the district, these things or anything else, and I'm going to ask you to rate a few aspects of the district from 1 to 10, with 1 being horrific and 10 being super amazing. And when you think about what you're going to pick to rate, you're communicating something to all of us. So if you want to highlight something good and something positive, pick something with a high, something you think is really good. And then add a little note about why you said that. So for instance, one example would be, I think our finances are good because they're reported clearly and we have high reserves and no debt. So I'm giving that an 8. Or, whatever you want to rate. You pick. It can be any aspect of anything. Rate it from 1 to 10, or pick a few things. Pick 3, 4, 5, no more than 6 things. Pick a small handful or less of things. Rate them and give a very brief couple-word or short sentence description of why. I'd encourage you to take your paper. You each have paper in front of you. Write notes to yourself. You don't have to give them to me or save them. You can throw them out. But I found that it engages your brain a little better if you just write your answers down and don't just think of them in your head. So take a few minutes and do that. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm. It's not clear to me.
It's not clear to you?
No, I don't understand what we're doing.
So pick any aspect of the district as it is today, and rate it. And you're picking whatever you want to highlight to the group. If you want to make a point about something being really bad, find something low and rate it. If you want to make another point, you pick them. Whether it's, the quality of the commission, the operations, the finance, any of these topics or anything else. This piece of paper is merely meant to help you start to think about the district across its breadth a little bit. We all kind of have our own thoughts about what we focus on. I think, as you mentioned, Ed, maybe one of us is really into finance, so we think about all the finance things. There's a lot going on, and more, because this wasn't written for a harbor district. And so pick at least 3 things, 3 or 4 maybe, 5, no more than 6, because we don't want to, we just want to get a few important things that you want to highlight. And you don't need to worry about whether you know where this is going. It's just getting added into the pot, and you'll see how it all fits together as we move through this.
Yes, no, yeah, yeah. That's, this whole thing.
It's just against the wall. And I'll know you're done when pencils drop. I see a few already dropping, so that helps me time it. And remember, you may want to write a lot of words to yourself, but we're only going to want a short phrase or half a sentence.
You're getting worried.
Yeah. We've got some essayists here.
Don't worry.
It's going to be like a New Yorker magazine.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're still writing, just to keep us moving, I'm going to ask you for one at a time, so we're going to be going around for a little bit, so you'll have a chance to keep finishing your thoughts there. I see Sabrina and Virginia still writing, so why don't we start with Ed. Will come around the room. Your pen's down, so why don't you give me one? You pick whichever one you want to give, and we'll come back to you for the rest.
Alrighty. So I would say that in the world of the Finance Committee, we're off to a good start with the work the Finance Committee did in the beginning of the year. Some of the folks in our audience were members of that committee.
Okay, good. You know, I'll note that I thought that I happened to be there for the audit presentation. I was impressed so many times. They make no sense or they're useless. I thought that evening's presentation was pretty good, and I see a lot of them. So good. Do you have a number to put with it?
1 to 10?
1 to 10. One's horrible.
I would
Is
say
this current or
Current, as of today.
this is, well, good question. I would say the challenge for me to answer that question, just so that you know, is that the Finance Committee changed over towards the end of the year.
Okay.
And so I don't really, so one problem I have is that the current situation is not as good as the past.
Okay.
And so I would give it a 5.
All right. Forgive my writing, but Finance Committee, good start, less good now. I mean, that's not really in English, but did that capture it?
Gets the idea.
Sabrina, do you have one?
Yeah. The culture of harassment, retaliation, and discrimination at the district.
Okay.
I personally have experienced sexual harassment, gender discrimination, sexual orientation discrimination. I've been marginalized by the board. I've been marginalized by staff members. I've experienced garden variety harassment, scapegoating. I've been blocked from participating on committees. I've been blocked by the board from holding an officer position. There's been a lot of petty politics going on here. And I'm particularly concerned that our staff, I assume it was the general manager, requested that you interview a former staff member who personally retaliated against me and cost this district a lot of money in a completely unjustified settlement. And his retaliation was largely based on my discovery of financial fraud from our former IT vendor. Long story, we don't have time for that right now, but I want to point this out because when you have these types of things going on, your district is rotting from the inside and you can't be functional because these things are so disgusting and horrible that it really kills the whole district.
Okay. So I guess you want to put a very low number on that. Not that a number translates, but it's just to keep the pattern going.
I just kind of feel like you're trivializing a lot of this.
We can
but
leave the number off. That's fine.
I think that'd probably be better for this.
So that's.
Unless you really want to rate that. I mean, it doesn't seem like it needs a rating.
It doesn't need one. That's obviously bad. Coming around, Robert, or I'm sorry, are you?
Anita.
Anita. Go ahead, Anita.
Well, I gave our infrastructure a 4 because obviously there's a lot of needs out there for improvements. I attended the HDOC replacement committee meeting last night, and it was obvious to me. I'm not a committee meeting, HDOC replacement meeting for the community, and there's a lot of improvements that are needed out there.
Much more needed. Okay.
How many members of the public showed up?
There's 7 members of the public, not including the vendors and such.
Thank you.
Okay, for more infrastructure, much more needed, I guess, progress. Robert?
My favorite thing, communications.
Okay.
That's what I do for a living. I give this agency a 4 because we can always improve the way we communicate internally and externally. Specifically, lack of communication or poor communication leads to bad press, bad reputation management issues, and you just go down the drain there. So I give it a 4.
Okay. 4 seems to be a popular number. Tom?
I had exactly the same thing Anita had, so I guess I'll just skip that.
But I'd like to hear it. What number did you give it?
Same thing, 4.
4, okay.
Most assets pass the useful life, and it's difficult to get the momentum and direction to renew and rebuild.
Okay, so it's going to feel like cheating, but you get, now, everyone can add when you come around if you've heard one. Let's hear them. Add your fresh one in then.
Operational resiliency, I gave it an 8. No matter the problems, the Harbor District keeps operating.
So I didn't hear the end. No matter the problem, you find it keeps
No
working.
matter the problems, the Harbor District keeps operating.
Okay.
What's the current staff to thank?
Okay, that's 8. Steve?
Of this, I looked at employee and leadership development, recruits and retains a workforce competent, motivated, adaptive, and safe working. I think that's absolutely true. Continual learning and improvement. That's something that we actively encourage. Working on institutional knowledge and succession planning and professional and leadership development. And I think that we all work well and hard together on that. And I'd give us an 8.
Okay. I didn't capture all the words, but
John.
John, thank you.
Yeah, obviously we all have 3, but since others have
Yeah,
already
let's hear your
mentioned-
repeats now that we're
Yeah,
done.
since others have mentioned the infrastructure and stability, I'd like to be more optimistic and just say that I would rate as a 7 from the big picture, where I've got to give credit to the board, as I tell others who do bring to light, of course, the concerns that the shovel's not getting in the ground, which frustrates everyone. But the board, since in my year and a half here, have unilaterally every board member has supported almost every single project and funded it. And staff have moved forward with hiring. Nowadays, it is a challenge to get the shovel in the ground because we in California, and that's why we're here, I believe, we care about the environment. And there are significant time challenges when the regulatory agencies want to ensure that the environment is protected. And we have the board has allowed us to hire and not slowed anything, allowed us to hire some of the best consultants to work through that maze, some of the best consultants in the world that are working on these projects. So we've got a lot of, I'm excited, we've got a lot of projects nearing the shovel in the ground. So I am more optimistic as far as the infrastructure and really appreciate the board's support, and I'd give us a 7.
Okay. Well, you know, I'll have to say that when I talk to people, because I talk to hundreds of people, I mean, I'm interviewing right now for 3 or 4 of these now, so I talk to, 15 people a week or something. If this was completely stuck some years ago, it takes a while for people to see something new, right? So I hope that this is the case. Did you give 7 or?
Yes, 7.
Okay, 7. So thank you for that. Did we catch up on your other ones that are repeats at this point?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else that's a repeat.
Okay, I thought you said you had some repeats.
No.
Virginia?
So, I took a look at the financial viability issue here,
Mhm.
and I would actually give it a 7.
Okay.
I think it's financially strong. I think the finance committee is actually better today than it was when we first started because it has a more focused scope on actually talking about finances instead of a scattered scope of talking about everything that people think should be financial. So for example, the last meeting we had talked about the new Little Hoover Commission report on reserves and how special districts need to look at reserves, and it's something that LAFCO, I think at the state level was even looking at and kind of discussing the trend of reserves for special districts. So I think that the finance committee today is more focused on actually dealing with financials of the district, the financials of the district. I would like to see in the future as things progress that we get a CAFR in place at some point.
A what?
CAFR, C-A-F.
Okay, CAF for the finance, yep.
Financial, yeah. I think we can get there. I think that would be a big boost for the district.
Does everyone know what CAFR is before we keep talking about it?
Well, I don't even think you wrote down did you write down the rest of what I said?
Stronger committee, it's improving. I didn't get all the detail.
Yeah, so that's fine. I mean, I would like to say that it's more focused on dealing with the finances of the district than it was before.
Okay.
I'd like to add to something.
Yeah, can you just hold one sec?
Take our turns.
Yeah, can we just hold a sec? We'll come.
The other thing is to piggyback on employee and leadership development. I do think that our staff is productive.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that that is in large part due to the general manager. I think he is very good about making sure that the staff is focused on the work that the board has directed it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also, in my opinion, careful to make sure that they're not overtaxed and overburdened, especially with some of the problems that the board has had.
Do you have a number for that?
Yeah, probably about an 8.
Okay. Okay. If you don't mind, Sabrina, let's come around to Ed, and then you'll have. Do you have more, Ed?
Could you tell me what CAFR is, please?
Yes. I'm forgetting the acronym, but it's a national. It's actually with Canada, a national financial award for good budgets, and they have a bunch of specific standards for how to organize them. And the purpose is to make them transparent, to make them intelligible to both boards and the public. And so it's a whole framework.
It's like an award.
Yeah, it's an award. Your budget will get judged, and then what's nice about it is they'll recognize you publicly. They'll come out, take a picture with your staff who did it.
Present you the plaque and
Present you a
everything.
plaque.
Yep.
And it's just a signifier that your budget lives up to these transparency standards.
GFOA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comprehensive, audited financial review.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that helps.
It's a nice thing to do.
I'll go to infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I agree with John that we've hired some good consultants.
Mhm.
I think some are great, some have a lot to be desired.
Mhm.
My concerned with our infrastructure. One is, like everybody else is saying, it needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
And my reason for not rating it high is partly because of that, but also because we are doing projects without a strategic plan, and we tend to want to do things just to show that we're doing them. And I agree that in some cases that's a good idea, because there's some aspects of the work that we're doing that aren't that expensive, and they'll help solve some problems. But overall, we don't have a strategic plan, and we don't really have a good operating plan. And so my feeling is, without that, you're not going to really do a good job.
Okay. Do you want to put a number to that? It's just going to help later. I know it's arbitrary. I mean, it's discussed already.
I would say 3.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to add up to causing us to make a decision. It's just going to be part of the exercise later. Yeah, you know, this is a difficult problem for a district like this, with a lot of pent-up desire to make progress, right? And yet it is true that you don't have sort of a master plan, a global thing for how everything fits together. Right. So that's an issue, and maybe that will be a topic for how these things are pursued. You don't want to keep planning forever and then never get anything done. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, you don't want to just do stuff to get them done. It's kind of a difficult thing.
Yeah.
Sabrina? And feel free to catch up on any of the existing ones in relation to adding anything.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to start by adding to my. And while Commissioner Corrali was speaking, it reminded me that there is a tendency to one-up, and it's not conducive to a good flow conversation. Mm-hmm. So the one-upping is not a good thing for the board as a whole. Also, you didn't include retaliation, which should be on there.
Okay.
And I mentioned that. As far as the operational resiliency goes, mm-hmm. It's an interesting choice of word, resiliency, because I think that from an operational resiliency standpoint, we would get a 1. Is that the lowest thing we
mm-hmm.
could get?
Well, you could give a fraction if you want.
A 1 would be fine. And the reason for that is we're operating without basic emergency planning. We don't have a tsunami plan. That's huge. There's no evacuation plan that the district has communicated to tenants and users of the facility. The county has an evacuation plan, but it's non-specific to our property. And the truth of the matter is the county's evacuation plan is not a plan that works. When you get onto Highway 1, and if there was a tsunami at Oyster Point, it would be the same thing. If you try to get onto Highway 101, traffic would be completely gridlocked. So those are things that need to get thought about. And also, we don't have a plan for sea level rise. We now know what our ADA problems are because we have a wonderful report that we just learned about at our last meeting, but we don't have a plan in place for fixing those things. And we don't even have those things prioritized. At least they're not prioritized in a way that it's been presented to the board. So from an operational standpoint, these are really key things that need to get looked at, haven't. So those are things I think we could do a lot better on.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Anita?
Okay, let's see. I'd like to add a new one,
Mm-hmm.
Customer satisfaction.
Okay.
I'd give that a 5. Mostly because I see the public as our customers.
Yeah.
And I think on one hand, they might be happy with some of the progress we are making as far as our finances, yet they are not so happy with how the commission's functioning, I guess, from the comments that you've made and also ones I've heard.
Could you provide us with specific examples?
Well, just some of the articles that end up in the paper show a negative light on the commission. So that's obviously going to impact the public's views.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have any to catch up on from any of the existing ones that were reviews for you?
Let's see. Mine is with finance. It had nothing to do with the finance committee.
Mm-hmm.
It was more about the financial viability of the district. And to me, because we have no debt and we have good reserves and we have good people on staff that are monitoring things better than I guess in the past, I would give that an 8.
Okay.
But it has nothing to do with the committee.
Yeah, I'm putting a little line here, sort of same topic area, but got it.
Right.
Robert?
I have 3 that repeat.
Go ahead.
First is finances, and I'm similar with Anita. This is not committee specific, it's just finance in general. I give it a 7.
Okay.
No debt, have reserve, great reporting.
Okay.
And I'm all for the CAFR too, I just want to say. And then the other repeater is staff. And that I have is 8.
Okay.
Dedicated, hardworking, effective, and great leadership by the GM.
Okay. And your third repeat?
Infrastructure.
Yep.
I gave it a 5 because I'm trying not to look at the Harbor District in a vacuum. Among public agencies, we're about average. Most agencies are addressing aging infrastructure. I don't know any agency that isn't, so that's why I give it a 5. It's average.
Okay. Tom?
On financial viability, again, I was identical with Anita. 8.
Okay.
The loans paid off, good reserves, good reporting. So that was kind of a repeat. On customer satisfaction, do we have that? We started that one yet?
Yeah, we do.
Anita.
Okay. I gave it a 7.
Okay.
However, it's improving. We need further statute revisions, and our leases are problematic. And then
and what do you mean about statute revision?
we have laws governing the operation of the district that could be enhanced to make the district work better.
Okay.
And this is maybe at a fine-tuned staff level. I think the staff knows what we're talking about. And
Like policies and procedures?
Ordinances.
ordinances,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that would that affect customer satisfaction? Is that what you're saying?
It might increase the level of tenants that we have occasionally that are transients passing through.
Right.
And then our leases are problematic and we don't have a way to change them.
Okay.
But then that kind of relates to, do you have operational optimization?
Not really. It might go under resiliency. Let's hear what you have to say.
It's difficult to overcome the momentum needed to complete capital improvement projects. We're having difficulty getting leaseholder contracts rewritten to further enhance operations. So the current staff has made magnificent strides in this area. However, there's still a lot of work to do. This also gets into the number of times we've been downgraded for the LAFCO report saying we need a property manager. We don't need a property manager. We need contracts that are fair and equitable across the board and to be rewritten. At this point, we can't do that.
Yeah. I'm going to note it though. I'm going to put it over here where you originally mentioned it, that contract. I guess that's a very long-term problem, like decades, right?
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready? Can we move on?
Yeah.
Okay, Steve?
I'd like to revisit the financial viability,
Yeah.
high reserves, debt-free, and good staff,
Uh-huh.
and give it an 8.
Okay.
The infrastructure, can I give it 2 scores?
Sure. You want to break the rules? Be a rebel.
Because I recognize some of the statements that were made early on about the existing conditions,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sort of dialed in very much to John's perspective about the sort of the pending nature
Mm-hmm.
of what we are likely to see during 2018 with the contracts that have been approved by the board for moving forward with plan specs and engineering, and now we're going to be starting to see bid awards coming back to the board. Then we're going to start seeing the metaphorical or actual shovel in the ground. So I give some of the understanding and condition and maintenance a 5, but overall I think that we are working very much in the right direction, and so I'd get back up to a 7 as well.
Okay. Good. Any other catch-ups, or we got you?
I think I'm good there.
Okay. Any more?
Yeah, to catch up for customer satisfaction.
No?
Yeah, I'd like to give us a 7 there.
Okay.
Gotta say that our staff is quite impressive. As someone that's worked at marinas around the world and has worked at distressed properties, I can say I've been very pleasantly surprised and very welcomed here. Our staff is tremendous at both properties, and that comes from, I think, leadership of the board and the general manager. They instill in all staff the importance of excellent customer service, and we're everyone, all facilities can work harder in that respect, and we are working harder at it through additional training, etc., for the staff. But in my going on 2 years now, the number of complaints or negative discussion from our customers, our tenants, our park goers, it's just been remarkably low. And the ones that the discussion I have had, the vast majority have been things that we're aware of and are trying to control, like, for instance, out of control dogs and this kind of thing. But I think overall our customer satisfaction is very good.
Do you want to put a number?
A 7. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Does that catch up your various ones? If there's any repeats, let's just get them done.
Stakeholder understanding and support, is that?
I mean,
Not yet.
we haven't really gotten that, so I'm going to put it here. We're kind of in the stakeholder realm. Okay, go ahead. What do you want to say?
I refer back again to my experiences and with boards of directors and owners of facilities. Our board of commissioners, I think, need to be or deserve to be commended. The stakeholder understanding and support is, I think, tremendous. That the transparency, a lot of the discussions were not transparent enough, even though I believe our processes, including the finance, over the year and a half I've been here, I think it's obviously moving strongly in the right direction. But the insurance, the board, making sure that all staff understand that making certain that the public are involved in all meetings and properly noticed. It's I believe deserves an 8.
Okay. Good. Virginia?
So I have put together, kind of lumped them together, community, sustainability, and stakeholder understanding and support, because it wasn't clear to me what the difference was between
That's fine.
stakeholder and community sustainability in terms of the definition of community and stakeholder. But at our core, as an elected body, we serve the public. I don't believe that our stakeholders, who I define as the public, really have an understanding about what we do as a harbor district. And that's probably, I live probably the furthest away from this district, so that's just my impression. I think that the understanding and support, or the lack of understanding that could lead to support, is harming us because of all the drama that's been on the harbor district ever since I've been on this board for 2 years. The negativity, the fighting, the pettiness, that will, in my opinion, question the sustainability by the community of this district. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't be sustained. I believe that we should, but I'm just saying that living in an area that doesn't have a direct benefit from the harbor district, and seeing all of the negative press and reading about all of the problems that this board has had over the years, not just this year or the 2 years, but over a long period of time, makes the community question how this harbor district should be sustained. So I give those a 3.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that there's more work to do, and I think we can move forward in doing positive work. I think that customer satisfaction is kind of lumped in there too. Again, we serve the customer, we serve the public. I haven't really talked to the tenants. They seem to be okay, but I know that there were problems again, so I'd give that a 3. In terms of the board, now customer service, and I'm kind of dividing it into 2. Customer service from our staff, I think, is quite high, so I'd probably give it a 6. And so I think that that's good, and that would go into operational resiliency because of all of the issues and the problems and the drama that we've had. The staff is still able to adequately serve our customers.
Okay.
And that would go back into the culture thing too. I think that we need to hear from the public and that their opinion is important. That's that 3rd thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that board members who have an opinion remember that their opinions are not facts and that all opinions should be respected.
You're talking here.
Yes. And I hear that from the public too, that they feel like they can't say anything, or they're afraid of retaliation by board members. But again, these are things that I think can be worked on.
Okay.
You have nowhere else to go but up.
All right. Okay, let's see if we can wrap it on this round. And
Okay, I have some catching up to do.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go with, I'm not sure which category you'd like to put, I'll let you decide.
By the way, I'll turn to you two if you have a comment. I'm sorry, I'm looking this way. After Ed, we'll give you a chance and we'll keep going around.
So I think we have at least 2 different categories of customers. We have the customers that are actual business customers and users of our facility.
Right.
And then we also have the category that is the voters that put us in this place, and that are, there are taxpayers. And like Virginia said, there's a big group of them that don't reside on the coast side. And I would venture the opinion that we as a board have no clue what the general San Mateo County public wants of us.
Yeah, I think
We haven't done anything to reach out to them or to understand what their desires are for the San Mateo County Harbor District. And I think that's important for a number of reasons, which I can go into later if you guys want.
Well, I think it's self-evident.
Yeah. And then in terms of our actual customer base, I don't think, you know, there's some that are happy, but you know, when we have the commercial side, the businesses, and then we also have the recreational side. I would say from the commercial side, we are right now, just as an example, we've got 2 organizations that are in conflict with each other, and that conflict to some extent was created by the board and by staff.
Can you summarize quickly what?
Well, there's dispute about where to put some infrastructure.
Oh, right, okay.
And you know that went, you know, the current board, I wasn't part of the board when that happened, so I don't know all the history of it, but it goes back to at least 2016, if not even further back. And there's other examples of that. Maybe that's something that, well, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So I wouldn't really give us high marks on the customer satisfaction. If you talk to the folks at the recreational side, you know, there's issues. I mean, when I have a boat there. I walk down the dock. I'll trip 3 or 4 times on planks that are raised, for example. You know, our infrastructure there is really pathetic, and we just had a meeting about fixing the infrastructure on the commercial side. I don't think the public is aware of why that decision was done the way it was. It's not clear to them. When I ask people on the recreational side, they don't have a clue.
Right.
And I think that just goes back to the fact that we're piecemealing our infrastructure. We don't have a strategic plan that we can lay out and tell the public, here's what we're doing. It's just sort of getting things done.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, let's see, our communication. I think our communication is not that great.
Which communication to who?
Communication to the public.
Okay.
Sometimes we get it right. That's definitely the case. But as a member of the public, and also as a commissioner, I've experienced consulting firms. I mean, we've had consulting firms tell us at our board meetings that they did a stellar job communicating with the public, and then when queried, like, how many people were there? Oh, there were 7. On something in this community, you're probably figured out by talking to people. This is a very engaged community. If the district has communicated to them that there's something of interest to them,
right?
You know, it doesn't take much to fill a room if you engage the public. So I think that's a place where we can do a lot better.
Okay. Do you have more topics, or does that clean you up?
Yeah, let me see. Public engagement. I don't know where this fits, but we do a lot of work through consultants, and we also do, you know, we hire out. In my opinion, I would like to see us as a district bring in more consultants as what's the word you use, Steve, for RFPs?
Through RFPs,
just so that we can hear what organizations, more than just 1 or 2, will do to solve a particular problem. It's a great way to understand the problem a little better and to give us better choices.
Okay.
I think that was it.
Okay. I'll move on to Sabrina while you're looking.
Okay.
Oh, actually,
yeah, I think I got it.
To give you guys a chance. I'm staring this way, and I'm sorry I keep forgetting. Do you have any comments or?
Under stakeholder understanding and support,
Mm-hmm.
I think our mission statement needs some work to
Okay.
help communicate what the district is about.
That's a good one.
Right now, I'd put it at maybe a 4.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance on that is I don't think the public really has any concept. I know I have a very limited concept of what our emergency people do, how they do it, what their scope is, how they interact with other agencies, how they're funded, whether or not there's funding out there that could help us do a better job that's not related to our normal sources of funding.
Okay, thank you. Catherine?
I think that, I think of all of these issues, I would agree with Robert that communication to the public about what the Harbor District is and does is at about a 2. It was addressed by Virginia and by Ed when you were talking about what people know about the Harbor District and in particular what it provides to them. Something that I think a lot of people need to understand is without this Harbor District, we wouldn't have any much in the way of good fresh fish locally. There's a lot of things that impact people on their daily lives that this operational district does. And I think communication is the weakest point. This board and the more recent boards have overall brought the Harbor District up from very low numbers to really excellent numbers on financial viability, on improving infrastructure. It's not perfect, but it's moving up. On leadership and employee development, it has just jumped way up. But the one that I think this strategic plan is a good start. And I'm really congratulatory to the entire board for getting a solid plan en route. And I'll just say thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then get my attention if I leave you behind too long.
I just wanted to add one last thing in the realm of communication.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that we've done is we've allowed Virginia actually touched on this a little bit. We've allowed the news media to talk about the district, and we know that they have their slant, they have their bias, and some media are worse than others. But I don't believe that you can rely on news media to give an accurate perspective of what's happening here in the district.
Okay.
We don't have any policy on communication, like how we should be communicating either as a board or as a staff. It's just kind of random.
Good point. Thank you. Sabrina.
Thank you. I'm going to pick up on communication since Ed just talked about it, Catherine talked about it, and others have talked about it. And I do agree that we are not doing a good job of communicating on many, many levels. Internally, externally, every which way imaginable. Poor. I give it a 1.
Okay.
With regard to the lack of policy, we don't have a policy on it.
Right.
So if there's some urgent situation or some message that needs to be gotten out to the public, there isn't a path that's defined by the board as to how to do that.
Right.
And that has had mixed results.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some very poor efforts on the part of general manager or board president or this or that to try to communicate a message that doesn't reflect the rest of the board and doing it on the board's behalf. So that clearly is not appropriate, and we need to think about, being prepared with our messaging so that when something comes up, we're not without a message pre-prepared that stands for what we think the values of the district are. And I'm sure that over at the Port of Oakland, I'm guessing you guys are probably pretty well prepared for most things that could come your way, and you're ready to go to bat, you know, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And you've got to fine tune it, obviously, depending on the situation, but that you have an arsenal of prepared statements and plans for how to handle things. We don't have any of that here. And so what happens is people use the media to manipulate the board, and it's easy to do that in this county, and play politics through the media. It's a common tactic. People do it everywhere. And depending on which media source, you know, you've got one in this county that's extraordinarily partisan, the Palo Alto Daily Post. So, for example, that group will report a particular perspective, not based on facts, but their political interests. And you see that on state and national level too. It's not anything particularly unusual. But if we were conveying a message that the board agreed on, that put our best foot forward, regardless of, you know, whatever the situation is, we could adapt to things as they come up, and we could feel like the messaging really represented us well. So that needs to happen, and
Okay.
it hasn't.
I captured that, by the way. It's getting tiny, but
Okay, I think you guys get the idea. We have made a few, you know, I'm not going to say we haven't done anything. We have finally gotten control of our website. That was a big ordeal. So the website has gotten a little bit better, although very oddly, if you look through the archive, the board packets are missing for meetings. And so for us to not have our board packets published on our website is hard to fathom. So I'm not sure what happened there, but I sure hope they're not lost forever. I hope we can get those online, because I mean, I think it's hard to pass any low-level transparency tests if you can't even get your board packets on your website. So I mean, that's just one example of an area that we really need to, you know, fix. With regard to back to operational resiliency, one thing I forgot to mention was, and I think I already gave that a 1, but we haven't come up with plans to address things like sustainability, you know, plans to protect our marine environment, water quality. You know, we've done a little bit with water quality thanks to the Resource Conservation District, but we haven't solved our water quality, or let's call them water pollution problems, that have been plaguing the district, both at Pillar Point Harbor and Oyster Point Marina, for decades. So there's more work to do there. That's always a really negative thing for us in the media when the water quality results come out in the summer. What's the name of that report that comes out? The beach, the
First
worst.
flush.
No, it's the beach report.
Yeah, it's the worst polluted beaches in the state. We're like,
It's put out by Hilda Bay.
yeah, no, I know that report.
it's statewide report. We're usually on,
Right,
we're
right,
up there on the top of the list, you know,
We win the award.
most years we're always on it, you know. So that's getting into, you know, we haven't really identified a topic, and maybe we should have a separate item specific to the environment and to wildlife and sustainability and those types of things, because there's a lot to that we haven't scratched the surface on.
Might as well add the fuel dock to that.
There's the fuel dock, there's the Cali, PA telling us we need to replace the single-walled fuel tanks at Oyster Point, there's the bad fuel lines, there's the, you name it. Yeah, there are all kinds of issues. It's an old, and that gets me back to infrastructure, which I would give a 1. And our infrastructure is aged out. You know, this place was built in the 60s and 70s. and it's reached its useful life and beyond, way beyond actually. And our facilities don't meet pretty basic standards that public members have for, a pleasant user experience. So, and it's not that it's not that our staff isn't trying to maintain what we have, they are. It's just gotten to a point where, stuff needs to get replaced. So that's been happening very gradually, and I think that's some of the feedback you've gotten about the frustration about projects not moving fast enough. Obviously, there are challenges with that, with getting the right permitting in place and all of that, which I know John's been working really hard on. So I don't think it's for a lack of effort on the part of staff at all. I think the staff has made a lot of effort. I just think we're spread thin. So the comment you made about somebody saying we were top heavy, I totally disagree with that. I don't think our management staff is top heavy at all. I think we're barely keeping up with the project concepts that have been approved by the board, and we're not implementing because we don't have the management staff on board to really execute. So how could we possibly be top heavy when that's so obviously the case? You can't every single meeting something about that comes up in one way or another. So there's no way to pretend that isn't a reality. As far as stakeholder understanding of what our district does, that's been a problem for this district forever. And part of the problem is we have no history. I have said this now at countless meetings since before I even got elected. There is no history of our district on our website. If you look at our website, there is no really good history reporting on our district. We don't have a list of past commissioners. We don't have a list of past general managers. Who the heck knows who served on this district in the past? Because I don't, I mean, there's no record of it. It's as if it never happened. Yet we've now increased our ability to destruct records that might have illuminated some of these mysteries. So who knows if we would ever be able to figure this stuff out, since we're now tossing everything. So if we can't tell our own story, who's going to do it? We're going to leave it up to the media to make up the stuff? We need to be able to tell our own story. So I think focusing on that is something that we could make a priority in strategic planning, because I think it's relevant to strategic planning. And it's kind of sad that we have to waste time on that, but since we don't have it.
I noted that, by the way. It's like I said, it's getting small. We'll switch to a new sheet.
I'll try to wrap it up. As was pointed out earlier, the whole county benefits from this district, as well as the entire Bay Area and people from out of state. They come here to Pillar Point Harbor for the seafood, for the view, for the surfing, for the boating, for the stand-up paddleboarding, for the kayaking, for a gazillion different reasons, the coastal trail, the hiking, to try to downplay the significance of the facility and to suggest, and I hear this sometimes from board members, that the facility doesn't serve the whole county and doesn't serve the entire Bay Area and beyond. For me, that just is simply not accurate. I believe that Pillar Point Harbor serves the entire Bay Area. And if you look at the use, which by the way we have not tracked, you'll find that it's busy, and the use has gone up and up and up as the Bay Area has gotten more crowded. And the use is going to continue to escalate as the population increases and people are looking for outdoor recreational activities and things to do. They want to get outside, and things are getting denser in the Bay Area, so they need more outlets. And we're providing a really wonderful resource for the public, which doesn't get talked about enough. So those things need to really be focused on. And, how do we make that experience for the Bay Area users and the countywide users of our facilities a better experience. Instead of being so inwardly focused, we need to be more outwardly focused. And that gets into communication.
Okay. As we move along, I'd like to wrap this section, and then maybe we have a 5-minute break or something. I'd encourage you, all the points are good. We've got a lot of great points. I think maybe some of them can be made a little quicker just to keep this moving, and for the people who are waiting to talk, it just disengages a little bit. So if we can try to be crisp as possible. And Anita, do you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Well, that's
really good.
you were the one that that's pretty good.
It's pretty crisp.
Robert, all I have to do is ask.
Sorry, I like brevity, so I tried to keep it like less than 10 words.
Tom.
One of the things that I've mentioned in the past that we've never undertaken is a marketing study to see who uses our facilities. There's been times when I've been out on the pier at 7 o'clock in the evening, there's 200 people walking on the pier, there's no fish for sale. Why are they there? Where did they come from? What do they want? What brings them here?
Yeah, I can tell you I may be one of those people. I'm from San Jose, and I sometimes just like to walk around out there. No
So
other
pretty.
purpose. Do you have more? Pretty
Brevity.
crisp, pretty good, Steve.
I got to agree with most of the comments about communications, about telling our story, about being proactive in telling our story and driving that rather than reacting to that. I agree with Sabrina on our history and the lack of sort of public awareness of that history. I think, but to be proactive, to get ahead of the message, and to try to communicate to the public at large who we are and what we do and the benefits we provide. I think, yeah, I would agree with all of the comments about how we're lacking in that.
Okay, I think we did it. You were the start of the wrapping.
Well, I have to add one thing, because I think that the communication piece is also important. I think the things that I brought up about the community at large, the best solution is to have better communication. I mean, I didn't even, I think what really made me realize, I mean, Robert said it, but Ed Carter really was like, oh my God, yeah, it's people really don't know, and Catherine summed it up well too.
Yeah, well, good. I don't know how tough of sitters you guys are, but would a 5-minute break be good to just get up and get a drink of water, use the restroom, use the phone, whatever you want to do?
Great.
Shall we try to get back at 8? That would be like 6 minutes short.
Sure.
Gives everyone a short break.
6 minutes.
I haven't met you before.
Robert, we're going to re-adjourn
just very brief facts. So
our
if they
meeting
ever ask
at
the media,
8:03.
They can
whatever
refer to
topic,
that.
they just because you can't memorize everything.
Yeah, you guys have a lot going on.
We're
So
back at it,
that's what we
folks.
send out.
Yeah.
So it's not
Thank
really,
you,
It's not
Robert.
Really messages. Sorry.
The fact sheet.
8:03.
Sorry.
All right.
It's gonna fall.
Okay, that was a lot of meaty stuff came out of that conversation. I think the most notable for me is this whole communication thing. It sounds like there's a lot of consensus around this. This wasn't mentioned, I don't think, even once in any of the interviews, so this is interesting to me. And it seems like all of you pretty much agree about most of that.
It was this was going that way, so it's kind of yeah, it's really weird.
Oh, it looks like it's collapsing.
Yeah, that's what it's doing.
Oh, there you go.
It just probably isn't cooked out completely.
It's this part here.
Yeah.
That made it worse.
Yeah.
Just careful you don't get your hand.
Take your stuff
Yeah,
off.
lift everything off.
I don't want this collapsing on anybody.
Oh, didn't we have a problem with one of those tables before?
Ooh, it looks broken.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Where's John? Let's take this out, and then we'll move one of Martin's things there, and oh, no, broken. Yeah, that's
Good thing we know.
okay.
Aging infrastructure.
Yeah, aging infrastructure right there, right?
Sorry, couldn't help that.
You're right.
Is there another, table back?
So
Here's some.
update.
It is.
Just that.
Doesn't really
Update.
roll.
Me
So you
too.
need
Well, I think it's
administrative.
just
I unlocked
I
it.
just
How
sat
do you do
down.
that?
Oh, I should have included you.
Oh, there you go.
Having this
Okay.
email with the IT guy. He was like, well, we have to remotely access the machine. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, that would be a daily occurrence because you have to update all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm having the same problem.
Yeah, I'm wondering
Here we
if
go.
we have to go through those. I could stand it.
We should be able to update.
Go for it.
Because
Yeah.
we're going to have to.
Yeah.
I'll forward you the email I sent.
There's milk.
there you go.
Assuming it's milk chocolate.
A little s'more, but
I love milk chocolate.
That'll work.
thank you.
I'm glad you mentioned that. 'Cause it's just-
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I thought the thing was gonna fall on your foot. I was like,
Yeah, almost did it.
Okay, are we back
Back
at
to you.
little emergency table repair? I don't want to spend too much time commenting on these because we have limited time. We'll have a chance to talk about them in detail next time. But I do think it's notable some of the good things that are happening here. There's some debate about the committee, but it seems like there's a strong consensus. Finances are pretty good. You could debate some details about it, but no debt, lots of money in the bank, and great reporting is certainly better than many districts, maybe most. I haven't heard almost anybody say you don't have a great staff. Maybe nobody's not, failed to say that.
Well, actually, I didn't get to comment on that, and I would say that, I do get complaints from time to time. Nobody ever calls to say great things about staff to me, but they do call to complain, and so you have to keep in mind, like, I think most people are generally pretty happy with the staff because they're not calling me, but when I get complaints, which I have passed on to the management, it's usually related to the same Harbor Patrol people, and there's a sense that it's sort of a recurring theme at Pillar Point Harbor that there are some attitudes from the Harbor Patrol which are people feel intimidated, they feel retaliated against and afraid, and they're afraid that if they speak out they're going to suffer for doing that. I have communicated that to staff as I promised those public members that I would, and in fact even just within the last 6 months someone came to me and said that they were actually thinking about getting organized to make a formal complaint, and I said, well, before we that happens, let me pass on the information to John Moran, which I did, and I just want to be perfectly frank about that.
Okay,
so
good. No.
and it's something, it's the same complaints that I've heard for years, mostly focused on the same person, so it's not as if it's a new thing.
I would like to pause on this though and note, I'm glad you noted it, it's important. I'm glad I see you writing notes. It's not really a strategic issue. It may be, we will talk about maybe staffing and service levels and stuff, but resolving a complaint, I think is.
I don't think we can resolve that here, but I think that for me, I cannot give it an 8. So an 8 does not represent the communication I
You
get
want to
from
give
the
it a
public.
number just to.
No, I don't really necessarily want.
numbers?
I mean,
Okay.
if I had to give, I'm not into the number thing because I think it's arbitrary and kind of doesn't hold any weight. But yeah, I just say that I haven't been getting positive feedback, but I have been getting negative feedback.
And may I comment on that?
Yeah.
It may end up being a strategic issue in that our I think we're talking about the patrol staff. They have a hard job to do because they have to do life rescue.
Mm-hmm.
They have to do some enforcement, although there's not a lot of that. They go on boats and do some inspections, and then they also have to do all the maintenance. And from the perspective of a strategic point of view, one question one could ask is, should there be a different way to deal with all of those aspects that staff does? I know that in Orange County, some of the marinas, the public marinas, have hired the sheriff, for example, to do enforcement, and then that allows the rest of the staff to focus on all the other activities that they do. And I, for one, as a person that has used the facilities as a recreational boater, in some places, like John's told me that where he worked, there was staff that just did marina management. They didn't do enforcement. They didn't wear clothing that made them look like enforcement officers, and so their relationship with the public was better. And maybe that's something.
I would agree that global issue is. I was just meaning the specific complaints at the moment. But that is an important issue, and I noted it here. It hadn't come up, but yes.
Yep.
And just one more global type of issue related to that I think is super important is if the public actually had a way to give feedback, meaning our tenants and stuff, about their experience with staff.
Right.
And we're talking, at the facilities level, I believe that feedback, if they could, I don't know, maybe there could be a feedback box or something.
Comment cards.
I think that direct feedback would actually probably create quite a bit of improvement, and it might take care of the problem altogether.
Okay. Yes. That's part of this larger issue, but good point. Let's move on to the next thing. Again, don't worry, we're not being comprehensive yet. We've heard a lot of things. We're going to keep hearing more things that will get put together and get sorted out over time. So we talked about today. We talked a little bit about the future and past that we talked about today, but now I want to look to the future and ask a question I pretty much asked you all during the interviews, but what is coming down the road at us? Any timeline in the future, the next year, in the next 3 years, in the long range future? What kind of challenges or opportunities do you think are critical for the district to be prepared or be preparing proactively to grapple with? Whether it's taking advantage of an opportunity that may be coming our way, or being prepared for a challenge so that we overcome it before it causes problems. Again, I would ask you to take a few minutes and just identify a couple of things, 2, 3, or 4 things that you think are most important. We don't have to talk about everything tonight. And you're simply going to explain what it is. We're not putting numbers. So what is that opportunity, or a couple of opportunities, or the couple of challenges coming our way that you want to make sure the district prepares for? And you don't have to get them all, because between everyone we'll start to capture a lot of them. Again, I encourage you to write it down just for yourself, a note, just to engage your brain a little bit in thinking it through, and take a few minutes to think about that.
Blush.
Thank you.
Again, the dropped pin will help me see when people are getting done. I see pens going down, so if you're still writing, keep writing. But why don't we start here with you, and we'll come around and we'll go in reverse. Again, let's try to be crisp about it. I'm not saying don't say what's on your mind, but there's ways of saying things quickly so that we can keep it moving.
Sea level rise, sea level change.
Okay.
I think that's a significant concern in the near future, near and far future. The district board, again, has been proactive there and already approved almost $100,000 for a consultant to do a sea level rise assessment. So I think that's very positive, and the board should be congratulated for that.
Okay, good. Obvious when you're a hard right?
Succession planning,
Yeah, succession planning, okay.
loss of institutional knowledge and experience. I think it's going to be a big issue over the next 5 years.
And the institutional knowledge, is there anything you can tell us while I'm writing that the board may not know about what's on your mind?
I looked today at our staff, and I see a lot of our senior staff at the facilities have got 15, 20, 25, 30 years of service. I know all of them recognize the light at the end of the tunnel is not non-coming train, that they're looking at retirement. Don't have any definitive dates yet from those people. We have had a bit of turnover and new people coming in, other new people coming in quickly enough and soon enough to allow for that transfer to take place as we see some of our long-term employees retire.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've experienced it, but I've definitely noticed a tidal wave of problems at my clients with hiring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For every kind
Yes.
of reason, qualified people,
Yeah.
cost of
Yes.
living, everything
Yes.
in the world. Super difficult.
Big
Some
deal.
agencies simply can't hire, it seems.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that just compounds this.
compounds that, absolutely.
Okay, we'll just take one at a time, Tom.
For opportunities, I had a greater number of visitors at Pillar Point, and then the rebirth of Oyster Point Marina.
I had Pillar Point somewhere, but oh, here it is. Meaning there's already greater numbers and you can take advantage of that, or getting more people to be?
No, I think that we're going to be seeing a greater number of people, and that's an opportunity for us.
Yeah, because all the stressed out people in the valley want to come out to the beach.
And then you got the rebirth of Oyster Point Marina.
Okay, rebirth of, I'm going to put it over here. Robert?
I had the exact same thing as what Tom said, but I'm just going to add a sentence.
Go ahead.
The opportunity is to be more innovative, creative, and even more public serving.
Okay, good. Anita?
I had that too, that John and Steve had, aging workforce, succession planning, and the disaster, well, it wasn't just the sea level rises thing, any kind of disaster of some kind. I mean, if there's earthquakes in Alaska, it could be easily an earthquake here that could lead to a tsunami or
Right.
some kind of an issue, so we should be planning for that.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, I have personal goals in our team is to make sure we do get an award, a budget award. And the second is to, we need to replace some old antiquated systems. That's upcoming. Our financial systems are very old, and our TMP system, the marina system, is pretty old. So we're looking at, those are upcoming challenges.
You cheated very nicely. You just slipped all three of those by me. I couldn't
Yeah.
stop you.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just teasing you. Sabrina?
There's so many. Countywide needs assessment
And what does that mean?
means we shouldn't be doing anything without figuring out what the countywide users need.
Uh-huh.
So that would be number one.
Okay. Can you tell me the word you used? It just went out of my brain.
Countywide needs assessment.
That's right. Okay.
And with regard to the succession planning, I would be curious, but I'll ask about this later, about cross-training and training manuals and things like that, because that can help. And then also very concerned about the lack of diversity on the harbor patrol. I think we only have one woman that's a harbor patrol person, and she was the first woman that we'd had, maybe, I don't know, ever. So that is something that we need to be looking at, is how do we become a more diverse workforce? Moving to a management agreement at Oyster Point Marina opposed to the current JPA arrangement.
Okay.
And this fits with that too, in a way. We need to create build facilities that are lease revenue generating.
At Oyster Point or everywhere?
We don't own any land there, so we can't do it there. Pillar Point Harbor.
Okay. Anita was so good at slipping by several. I let you slip by several.
Thank you.
Can we move on to Ed?
Oh, the temptation is so great. I have continued to support our commercial center, the fisheries, the charter fleet, the human-powered vessel boats. And just as part of that, we need to start at least having a look at how to manage conflicting user groups. You know, we've got kiteboarders ripping through the harbor with kayakers trying to get by, and then there's also issues surrounding environmental protection related to that. I also had countywide assessment.
Hold on, I'm still catching up to your notes. Okay.
I had the same thing as countywide assessment. I think that's really important because we're doing this, we're heading towards this ginormous thing with Oyster Point, but yet we have no clue what the county wants. Let's see, sea level rise. John got that for me. So one thing that we have is that, and I think Tom brought that up, we have a ever increasing use of our facilities, and it's an opportunity, but it's also comes along with associated issues, things like traffic, for example. How are we going to deal with that? And parking. There's you know, we don't reside alone in this area, so we have our partner agencies that we can work with respect to traffic and parking, and that's all coming up. So that's all going to be a challenge for us to come to some way of dealing with it in a way that's good for the district, but also good for the greater community.
Okay, good. I'm going to pause you if you don't mind, and let's go to Regina.
Yep.
Keep it moving.
So I think the CAFR is, I think it's achievable. I think it's important because I think that a governing board's biggest responsibility is to make sure that the finances of an agency is stable and sustainable.
Okay.
I think if you look at the bigger picture, I'm looking at bigger picture, a lot of the things that Ed and Tom have said about opportunities for Pillar Point and Oyster Point will result in, or will come from, how do we enhance economic development, local economic development, which will require collaborative working relationships with the jurisdictions that we have to deal with, and you know, traffic, for example. I mean, we got to work with the cities and the county, and so we got to look at a regional approach in terms of our collaborations with various jurisdictions, because we are not alone in this. And let me just say, for economic development, that includes supporting, you know, our businesses as best as we can, whether it's the commercial fishing industry to the, you know, tourism and whatever it is. I mean, that is the things that will help, I think, the district with its image and actually be a benefit for county residents.
Okay. Coming around, do you have any more?
Steve hit on mine, the issues that we're going to have with
Succession planning.
yeah, with long-term employees. Some of them, one in particular, over 30 years, and the institutional knowledge that we're going to lose there, and trying to hire same quality of employees with the housing crisis is going to be a challenge, I think. We did, under the general manager's direction today, we gave out 6 awards to staff, which they're very appreciative of, and we calculated that between those 6 employees, we had over 100 years of staff, and that's a gain. You know, something that the long-term board members and the district should be proud of. Retaining employees, staff members, team members for that long is very unusual nowadays.
Yeah.
People tend to be more
move
around a little bit more.
I just mentioned very quickly, I was in the water district yesterday in Novato, and they have a housing program, difficulty hiring people and keeping them around. That's helping them a lot, they think. Basically give low interest loans, and then the district owns a little bit of the property when they sell it. But, okay, Steve? Yes, but do you mind if I get our
Please.
I think that focusing on improvement of leased facilities, aggressive focus with a solid plan can also help get past the difficulties with the leases themselves. In other words, replace your facilities and institute new leases. And I think the district probably has a way in its current leases to do that, to put this mess behind us. Don't live with it any longer, get rid of it. But it's gonna take some investment.
You'll make money in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, while we're looking over there, Catherine, it's,
I agree with that. I think it's a huge opportunity with some good planning. I know there's been some investment in this in the past, some drawings and some thoughts. But if the Harbor District puts some solid money behind, towards renovation and then marketing, I think ultimately you'll be serving the public, you'll be getting out a good PR message, and it's all good.
Yeah, and your lessees will benefit from this as well.
They'll make more money, and we'll make more money because we get
Exactly.
fees.
Okay.
Even though I will be
Think
very,
Sam's in the harbor.
I will be very sorry to lose Catch Joanne, which is my second home.
all right. I think we're back to you, Steve.
Okay, I'd look in the future to increasing the profile and visibility of the district so that we become the go-to people for anything maritime, either on the bay or on the Pacific coast. I've watched interactions between our staff and combined representatives from Coast Guard, Fish and Wildlife, sheriffs, NOAA, and the respect for those people, for our staff, is there. And it goes back to, I think, the communication, telling the story, the history, all those things. But we can increase our profile, work on increasing our profile, our visibility, our credibility out there. That will serve the district well.
Okay, good. Tom?
Most of the things I also had have been discussed, so I won't re-repeat it, but
Will you just note them so I can note it? Just you don't have to discuss
expanding
them.
Johnson Pier and infrastructure, traffic, infrastructure of all that exists at Pillar Point is basically shot. On the sea level rise, a corollary to that is climate change. If we have more domoic acid, that's really bad for the fishing fleet. If we lack the upwellings, we basically don't have our pelagic fish coming through. That'll destroy our fishing industry. Owning our administration building.
Okay. Okay. Anita?
One of our challenges is to improve our communication with the public.
Okay.
And that's, I guess, it's already been
Yes,
discussed,
but that's fine to repeat it here. Sabrina?
Access. We are a district that has 2 facilities, one of which we own, the other we don't, but both facilities have important trail access points. The Bay Trail and the Coastal Trail. The Bay Trail is going to get, it sounds like, redone if the development happens. I think the development's happening, we just don't know when it's happening because there isn't a timeline that's accurate right now as far as I know. But so that we can kind of check that one off. But as far as the Coastal Trail goes, our Coastal Trail connection through the district, which there is a strand of the Coastal Trail that goes right along the water through our property, is not it doesn't really exist. It's just how people walk. And so we haven't done anything to designate it, to make it wheelchair accessible, to make it easy for people with strollers and bicycles and the kind of traffic that we get every day. There's just been no work done to improve that trail access through our facility. And so that's something that we really need to focus on.
Okay. Ed?
I'm glad that Tom brought up climate change, because I think that's a component of, sea level rise is a component of it. And one aspect of climate change is its effect on our fisheries, but also its impact on the marine mammals that are, we're seeing whales show up and stay here for 6 to 8 months sometimes. It's a great thing, but it's also has some challenges. And then also with respect to more severe weather events, that will present problems with, and I think with some good planning and some forward thinking, we can set up the district to deal with those in a constructive way. So for example, we're going to have more heavier rain events. When that happens, we have a west trail that has problems with erosion. We have, I'll let you catch up.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Keep going.
We have water quality that's impacted by these weather events. So that means we'll have to communicate better with our partner agencies to try to deal with that.
Right.
And those are things we can actually plan for, because we know they're coming.
Okay, good. Sabrina, Virginia.
So I really don't have that much to add. I think that all of these things that we're talking about are really good things, but I will say this one thing, that in order for us to accomplish these things, we're going to have to work together as a board in a cohesive, positive, professional way. That means, again, going back to my other statement about understanding that opinions aren't facts and opinions should be respected from all the commissioners amongst each other and from the public and from our staff, vis-a-vis or with the staff, everything. I think that we can do all of these things, and I think it's an exciting time for the Harbor District. I just think that we need to be very together on this.
Okay.
And I have one last comment. Just to piggyback on that statement, I think that we have to look at the fact that we do not have a appropriate process, policy in place to handle sexual harassment, retaliation, and discrimination complaints when they come up, whether it's from staff members, former staff members, commissioners, whomever. So that's completely lacking. We are not taking the lead from the Assembly and the Senate right now in the work that they're doing to develop policy that's appropriate, and we need to do that. Because if you've got that kind of stuff going on within your district, you're not going to be able to get to all this other stuff, and you're not going to have the respect of the community either. And you're not going to have a functional board. So that is totally fundamental to making this agency functional.
Okay. Noted. Are there any others? We don't have to go in order. We can just, we'll take that one down. Okay. I'd like to, we have about 20 more minutes. And I'd like to do one more thing that I think if we move along, we can do it. It would be initial steps towards developing a vision for the district, which kind of skips all the particulars that we're talking about and the kind of on the ground stuff, and gives us an opportunity to think a little more broadly. And what I'd like to ask each of you to do, and in this case, if you choose to, I would like your notes. Sometimes you'll write things that are helpful, because what I'll do is I'll take either what you say verbally and or your notes. I'll get them typed out so we can read them all later, and we'll work on the vision again in the future. But I'd like to get an initial statement and hear from each other very briefly maybe And here's the way I'd like you to do it, a very particular way. I'd like you to think about the best version of the district that you believe is realistic. We're not talking Disneyland version or pie in the sky imaginary version, but a realistic best district. If this district is able to do the kinds of things you're talking about and be as effective as it can be, however far in the future you want to think, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, whatever. And I'd like you to describe some of the elements of that district that you would like to see in the future, and describe them in the present tense. So for instance, like you might say, and I'm purely inventing this, I'm not encouraging this one, like you might say, you know, this district has great employees and everybody in the harbor industry or on the coast who is interested in working believes this is a great place to work, so we attract great employees and we keep them. It's talking about it as if it were real in the current tense. But you can pick anything you want, any of the aspects of the district you want to describe. And part of it is not just for the fun of writing it down, but the kinds of things you would like to see in the future, the kinds of things that you hope we can make real in the future. So you don't have to write everything. Focus on a few things that you'd like to see in the future and write them down as if they're actually there. And again, if you want, you can give me your notes. I'll figure out how to read your scrawl if you have scrawl. And if you write neatly, then that'll be easy. And we'll hear from each other very quickly. So take a few minutes to think about what you'd like to see in the future and describe it, or at least some of the elements you'd like to see. Looks like we have some writers in this group here. Some of you are writing, keep writing. I saw Anita's pin go down. Why don't we start with Anita and come this way? And you can, let me know if you're going to give me your sheet of paper. I'll write down this, or you mind giving me it?
You can have mine.
Okay, so either read it or paraphrase it, whatever you want to do. Communicate to us what you're thinking.
Okay. What I see the future,
Yeah.
What I'd like to see, a great reputation with the public. Everyone wants to work here. The commissioners all like each other and work as a team. Safe and beautiful harbors with good water quality. Staff is happy and motivated, loves coming to work, proud to be associated with the district. Financially sound, excellent customer service, great level of trust between the public and the commission and staff. Open and transparent, improved infrastructure, a good strategic plan that's being implemented.
Okay. A lot of good things there. Good. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it because I want to honor our closing time, but go ahead, Robert.
I'm going to give you mine so you don't have to write it down. Mine was very specific to communications. It wasn't like a big overall picture, big picture thing. The San Mateo County Harbor District communicates in an effective and timely manner to help its stakeholders better understand the district's key priorities, accomplishments, and updates. The district leverages technology to further its communications message to a broader countywide audience.
Excellent. Thank you. Tom?
I'm going to give you mine. World-class restaurants and shopping opportunities, renowned facilities for boaters and tenants, fuel ice fishing that is among the best on the California coast, a top-notch bayside marina destination, fuel supplies, food service, and berthing among the best in the Bay Area, and being staffed by professionals and having the best harbor management in the state.
Okay, that's a nice picture. Steve?
Mine as well.
All right.
We will recognize the heritage, present, and future of our local fishing community, both recreational and commercial. We will enact sustainable use and development of our assets, be recognized as leaders in the county in all things maritime, find the perfect balance between resource protection and public access, reflect to the greatest extent possible the diversity of our community in internal and external relationships, hiring, and opportunities.
Thank you.
Tom covered mine pretty good. New quality concrete docks, and I'd like to also add to that, though, that along with the excellent staff and professional management, as Tom suggested, also that the district harbors and marinas host several boat shows and yachting related events annually. And I do want to say I'm saying harbors and marinas, plural. I would like to see the San Mateo County Harbor District expand and actually manage and own potentially more marinas and maybe even boat yards.
Okay, good. Virginia?
I'll give you mine too. So a couple of things. I'd like to see Pillar Point be a thriving place for businesses and a destination place while maintaining the charm and environmental integrity that makes the California coast unique. I would like to see Oyster Point also be a destination place while still being the region for innovation in the biotech industry. I would like to see our employees perform at their peak, their highest level, and in an environment that's got a high morale level. I would like to see our communications be positive so that the Harbor District can be shown in the most positive light. I would like to see the commissioners work together and treat each other with respect and behave ethically, respectfully, and with the highest level of integrity, because we, the elected leaders, are the example for the rest of the staff.
Great. Can I have yours since I
Yes.
didn't write anything down? Ed?
You can have mine too. I have San Mateo County has a world-class facilities. Pillar Point Harbor, the Harbor Refuge, with an award-winning life rescue team, with visitor serving, with light, helpful visitor serving staff. It is a recreation center. It is a recreation center that offers something for everyone. It protects its environmental resources with strong protective policies, education, and enforcement. Pillar Point manages its commercial and fishing and charter facilities in an open and fair manner and is a model for other organizations and marinas. The Harbor District has a reputation of open, honest, transparent, and strong financial profile.
Excellent, thank you. I guess you get the last word, Sabrina.
Thank you. I think it's really critical that we prioritize our goals and objectives based on a countywide needs assessment, because we might all have our personal opinions, but we are here representing the county, and we need to find out what countywide users actually want from us. What do they want from our district? This is for them. This isn't about what benefits us individually or our neighborhood or our whatever. It's about what can we do for the countywide users of the facilities. So without that, we're kind of at ground zero. We need that information in order to make intelligent decisions that are actually going to benefit the people that that elected us and that use the facilities. So it's just like, I feel like I keep bringing that up, and it's something that really needs to happen. Additionally, I'd like to see the district focus on the facilities that we own, and make the facilities we own a priority, and manage facilities that we don't own. So that means with CIP projects and spending, we need to be focusing on the facility that we own. If we want to take on new facilities, well, that could be a different conversation, but right now we own one, we need to be focused on it, and we're not, which is why that facility is so aged out and in disrepair and not serving the needs of the public. So in addition to that, Oyster Point Marina generates less than $2,500 per month in lease revenue from facilities such as the fuel dock, which needs to be completely replaced, as well as the fuel tanks and the lines, because they're unsafe and hazardous. And the yacht club, which I think we're getting under $500 a month for, and that gets back to bad contracts, bad deals, a need to get out from underneath all the bad years and years and years of shady deals that this board has made, not us in particular, but this district's board, because it's really hamstringed our ability to move in a positive direction. I think that my vision is really about renovating and expanding the lease generating facilities that we have at Pillar Point Harbor. That includes renovating Johnson Pier, replacing all the docks, which I've heard a couple people mention, and our cement block building that houses our concessionaires businesses, which is so outdated and not reflective of the county that we live in. The quality of that structure is incredibly poor. There's been significant sewage backup problems there, all kinds of things about the infrastructure of that building that show me that that entire building needs to be redone. Call it a renovation or rebuild, whatever makes sense. And expansion. I'd like to see our lease generating revenue facilities expanded on so that we have more money coming in, so that we can afford the projects that we'd like to do going forward, better maintain our facility, and hire the staff that's needed to actually implement things. So I think, you know, we could come up with all kinds of ideas about what we might like to do, but if we're not also thinking about how we're going to bring in more money to fund those things, the tax revenue only goes so far, you know.
Sabrina, are you going to be able to give that to me?
No, I'm not. And then also, just because I want to, you wouldn't be able to read it anyway, and I'd like to.
You could send it later.
Yeah, I could send it to you.
What I want to point out is I'd like to finish. Can you wrap up?
Yeah, so my last point was just that access issues are key. You know, we are supposed to be a facility about access to the coast, access to the Pacific Ocean, access to San Francisco Bay, two incredibly important water resources. And the access that we're providing is a bit of a shambles at this time, you know, so what can we do to improve on that? We're certainly not anywhere with, you know, providing the type of ADA access that's necessary, the coastal trail access that's necessary. Those things need to get looked at.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. It's just a few minutes before 9. If you can hand those in to me, I'll be getting these notes put together, and we'll put together a plan for the next meeting and more of the process. And I think we'll be communicating through future board meetings. I'll work with staff to communicate next steps and how we're moving, so we'll be prepared to do that. I hope it's not too rainy for anyone who has to drive far. And thank you. We got a lot of good information tonight. I think that's it. Virginia, do you want to?
Nope, except that it is now, well, a minute to 9, so we're going to be adjourning early. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And if I could just compliment the board, compliment and thank Martin, compliment and thank Ed and Catherine for sticking through this.
Yes.
My
Thank
staff
you, Ed and
for
Catherine.
another evening meeting.
Thank
Greatly
you, Martin.
appreciate everybody's efforts.
Yes,
Thank you,
Anita
everyone.
and John, thank y'all.
It's going to take me